You're watching Knowledge and Wisdom, where we explore the depths of history, theology, philosophy, archaeology, and beyond. If you're curious to uncover truth and insight across time, this is the place for you. So, guys, I came across something that I find to be absolutely fascinating. They discovered a stone tablet dating to the Roman Byzantine period that has an extra commandment in it. So, we all know the 10 commandments. This one has an 11th commandment. You ever heard of this? This is the first time I've heard of it, believe it or not. So I just said, okay, I got to go live and tell you guys about this because I find it really, really fascinating. If you do too and you appreciate content like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the like button. I would greatly appreciate your support for the channel. It helps spread this information to new audiences. So please do what you can. Okay, so not clickbait. This is real. Like there really is a tablet that they discovered with 11 commandments on it. And it may shock you what the 11th commandment is. It's I can 100% guarantee it's not something that you would be able to guess. And it's actually pretty political in nature and incredibly convenient for the community that produced it. And you'll understand why I say that here in a moment. But this was discovered, by the way, and it's about 1500 years old. And I was checking out on this out online, and they actually auctioned it back in December 18th, I guess, of this year. Last year, I mean. December 18th, they auctioned it for $2 million. So they were, for some reason, making this either publicly or privately available for whoever wanted to purchase it, a museum or just a private collector, which I would love to have purchased that, but I don't have $2 million. My collection is nowhere near anything on this level. But that would have been awesome, right? So somebody got it, somebody bought it, and the history of it also may surprise you. Now, I say it's 1500 years old. It could be as old as 1700 years old, but roughly Roman Byzantine time period, which we know the Byzantine Empire really began so under Constantine, so maybe 1700 years old. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. I think it may shock you what the 11th commandment is. Let me share my screen, and we're going to go ahead and read all about it together. Let's see. You should be able to see it on your screen right around now. And here we go. So this stone tablet with 10 commandments has an extra commandment you've probably never heard of. That's the name of the article. Well, maybe I can help them with titles to articles and maybe kind of shorten things a little bit there. But anyways, so that's the name of it. You shall have no other gods before me is, of course, very noteworthy one. And by the way, some of y'all already know there are different versions of the 10 commandments. Maybe that's not the best way to phrase it, but you'll actually see this come up in Protestant versus Catholic debates. There are different ways to number the 10 commandments. You ever heard of this? I know I've done some shows on it before. And again, you'll come across this in apologetic circles because some Protestants will number the 10 commandments, like which one is commandment 1, which one is commandment 2. They will number them differently than Catholics. Now, what a lot of people don't know is they're the same commandments. They're just simply, there's a difference in how to number them. And the difference actually goes back to the Bible itself. Because when you look at the Bible, it talks about the 10 commandments in 2 different places. It lists them in 2 different places, and it never says, here's the 10 commandments. It doesn't say it like that. So if you're going to come up with 10 commandments, you have to determine how to interpret one as one commandment, another as another commandment. And there's ways in which you can look at it and categorize them differently, which is exactly what has happened. So different saints, different ecclesial communities have numbered them differently, but in reality, they're the same commandments. Okay, so we're not talking about that situation. We're not talking about just simply numbering them differently. We're actually talking about another commandment that's not found in any edition that you've ever seen, whether it's in the Bible or on a school wall, if they still have them up in any schools, or, in a courthouse, if they still have them up. I'm old enough to remember when they had those. Okay, you shall have no other gods before me. This is the first commandment. But then there's, of course, all the other ones as well. And the stone tablet that they're pointing to has that one, but also 10 other ones. The stone tablet is interesting because it shows how influential the Samaritans were in Judea around this time. Do you recall the Samaritans? So this is a group that broke with the Jewish community. And it happened during the time, really, originally with the son of King Solomon. So, right around that time. So, there was a schism in the community of the people of God of the Old Testament. And you can read about it in, is it First or Second Kings, right? You can read about them in those books and they'll tell you all about it. But a schism happened there, and some of the communities broke away from the Judeans and started their own thing, started their own temple, created their own capital, and eventually became known as the Samaritans. And they continued to be separated from the Judeans indefinitely. But they also preserved their own Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, and thus their own copy, if you will, of the 10 Commandments. So it says this tablet that they discovered was actually discovered as being used as a threshold. And people were walking on this thing, not knowing what it was. The stone tablet was unknown for many years. It's said to have been found in 1913 during a railway construction. Makes you think, what else is still out there, right? Afterwards, it was reportedly used as a threshold in a backyard. Oh, makes me cringe. The inscription is said to have been facing up. So people walked over the letters. It's written in ancient Hebrew script. So that's why you could see not only just it's really old, but clearly people were walking all over this thing. No, what were you doing? The commandments on the stone tablets are not clearly numbered. They are structured differently than what we are used to. In Judaism, the 10 commandments also include a prohibition against making graven images. Now, here's what the stone tablet says. Dedicated in the name of Korach, I will call you to remember for goodness forever. God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no gods other than me, or for yourself other gods besides me. You shall not make for yourself a sculpted image or likeness. For I, the Lord your God, am an impassioned God. Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet. You shall erect these stones that I'm commanding you today on Mount Gerizim. Rise up to God. That last part there. You shall erect these stones that I'm commanding you today on Mount Gerizim, rise up to God. There's the 11th commandment. What's going on with that? And why would the Samaritans do that? Well, again, the Samaritans broke away from the Judeans. The Judeans had the temple in Jerusalem. So they had to start their own temple, their own rival temple, which they did on Mount Gerizim. And so As theological justification for that, some might argue, they added this 11th commandment to justify their schism. Now, of course, they would interpret it differently, right? They would argue that no, actually, this was divinely given to us. God actually gave this to us, and it's the Judeans that took that part out, you know. So, the Ten Commandments that you're familiar with, it's because that was tampered with and taken away to cover up the fact that the Samaritans were right all along. So just, different sides are going to interpret it differently. But if you're not sympathetic to the Samaritans, you're going to say, that's awfully convenient for you. I suspect you added that, right? So I'm commanding you today on Mount Gerizim, rise up to God. That's 100% very clear justification for their temple, saying that God is saying, rise up there on their temple and erect those commandments on that mountain. So it continues. The tablet lacks one commandment, the prohibition against misusing the name of God. Now, one scholar believes that the omission of this commandment on this specific stone tablet is either a coincidence or an oversight. Quite the oversight. How do you forget that, right? Otherwise, the Ten Commandments in Judaism and among the Samaritans are known to be identical. This is evident in the Samaritan version of the book of Exodus, where the Ten Commandments are listed. Now, I will contest that a little bit with this scholar because the edition of the Samaritan Pentateuch that's available today is much later than the formation of their community, right? So could there have been some tampering in that meantime? Apart from one additional commandment unique to the Samaritans, which is included on the stone tablet, set to be sold. And like I said, sold for $2 million. US dollars, 2 million. My goodness. Oh, how I wish I was a millionaire just to buy this thing, right? Look at that. Wow. I don't know where I would put it. Right? I mean, how do you guard something like this? Where do you just put it? Your living room or something? Yeah. All right. So back to it. A commandment to build a temple. The extra commandment concerns building a temple on Mount Gerizim in Samaria. This commandment is also known from other sources besides this stone tablet. A temple complex was constructed on Mount Gerizim around 450 BC, according to the researcher. The group based around Mount Gerizim eventually developed into the Samaritans. The Samaritans were historically a branch of early Judaism and are ethnically Israelites. They share the Torah with the Jews, but not the rest of the Hebrew Bible. And that's, again, because you have that schism going on around the time of Solomon's son. What was it? Rehoboam, I think. And they broke into the Israelites and Judeans, and these different tribes, about 10 tribes broke away from the Judeans and Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin. And that eventually formed into the Samaritan community and was never reintegrated back into the Judean community. So that's what they're referring to there. And here's a picture of Mount Gerizim in the West Bank today. So you can see a clear picture of it there. The scholar explains that the Samaritans were in competition with the Judeans who had their Jewish temple in Jerusalem. The Temple Mount is considered extremely sacred in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Now, not always, because as I understand it, when Muslims came to claim Jerusalem, I think it was Umar who claimed Jerusalem. At that time, the Byzantine Christian Empire basically had the Temple Mount as a garbage dump. And from what I understand, it was Umar and the Muslims who cleaned it up and turned it into a sacred site. So I don't think it was always revered. in Christianity. I think that the Temple Mount being revered was probably a little bit later, certainly by the time of the Crusades, right? Um, well, that's a lot later. Okay, according to the Bible, the Ark of the Covenant and the original Ten Commandments were kept in the temple. However, on Mount Gerizim, there stood a rival temple, which was a very holy site for Samaritans. And by the way, as I've pointed out archaeologically, it wasn't just a temple in Mount Gerizim. There were other Jewish, that is non Samaritan, temples at the same time as the temple in Jerusalem. And it wasn't in competition with the temple in Jerusalem. It actually seems to have been coordinating and working in conjunction with it, which is contrary to the Old Testament. There's supposed to only be that one temple. But we know archaeologically there was multiple temples. And again, they were working in conjunction with the Jerusalem temple. And some of these satellite temples worshiped other gods other than Yahweh. So we've spoken about that in some videos. Okay. The Good Samaritan. This temple is said to have been destroyed by the Jewish prince when he conquered Samaria in 112 BC. From that point on, the relationship between the Jews and Samaritans became bitter. The tension is also part of the context for the parable of the Good Samaritan mentioned in the New Testament. The Samaritan population was likely large. It is estimated that they numbered several hundred thousand people when the stone tablet was created. Today, their numbers are much smaller. That's why you probably don't know anything about them. But they remain an ethnic group living in cities in Israel. They continue to regard Mount Gerizim as holy. And the scholar mentions that he has participated in their Passover celebrations because, again, they continue pretty much everything in the Pentateuch, right? The ancient stone tablet is to be auctioned in December 18th. Auction house estimates it to be $1 to $2 million. And this was in the year 2024. So December 2024 is when it was auctioned. And I'm jealous of whoever bought it. Right? Why couldn't I have been a millionaire so I could buy this stuff? I don't know what I would do with it. Like I said, other than just put it in the living room and look at it and tell people about it when they come by. I don't think I could justify the purchasing of it for several million dollars. But wow, that's just amazing to see something like that, right? And to be able to put your hands on this kind of piece of history, to see something with extra commandments. And here's what it actually points to. It points to the fact that there are variant readings of the Old Testament text, something that we've talked about a lot here on this channel. This is a perfect example of it. There are variant readings to Isaiah or variant readings to Jeremiah, significant variant readings to Jeremiah. I mean, some versions are 15% longer than other versions, for example. Some of these readings alter the meaning of the text. Some of them don't matter and they're inconsequential. So they're of a wide variety. But based on the extant manuscripts and readings that are available today, there is a pretty wide variety of readings of various portions of the Old Testament, just depending on what text we're referring to. So just speaking very broadly here. And it shows what's fascinating about this point is the later you go, that is the closer in time to us, in relation to us, the later you go, the more stable the text becomes, the less variance we see. The earlier back you go, whether we're talking about at the time of Jesus or before, and especially before, the earlier back you go, the more diverse the text becomes. The more diversity and different streams of the text there is. It's for some scholars to conclude that maybe there wasn't an original, but only multiple, if you will, multiple editions. I don't buy that. I think there had to have been an original, and then, yeah, maybe we could speak of different editions after that, but I would say the first edition would be the original. But I understand what they're saying, because what they're saying is early on, the earlier you go in circulation, you find a wide variety. That means that very early on, there was in circulation significantly different, in some cases, readings of various portions of the Old Testament. And it's caused quite a nightmare for scholars to try to discern what the original said. Because based on what we have available to us today, given the diversity of readings, and since we don't have any originals of any book of either the Old Testament or New Testament, it's hard to say what the original said. It's hard to know. Now, in this particular case, did the original have an 11th commandment to worship on Mount Gerizim? Okay. I don't have access to the original Pentateuch. You know, I obviously don't have it sitting on my shelf over there, right? There's no stone tablet over there like here's Moses's first edition kind of thing. I don't have that. All I have available to me are the different manuscripts, the earliest manuscripts. I can look at those, read copies of them, and try to surmise what the original said, right? Based on that, the best that we can. And I can say, however, with great confidence, that it's highly unlikely that the original would have had Mount Gerizim on it. Why do I say that? Why do I say that? How do I know that this is most likely an interpolation and an addition by the Samaritans, aside from the obvious fact that it's incredibly convenient for their theological position? Aside from that obvious point. Well, because we don't have, to my knowledge, any other witnesses to this reading. To my knowledge, this is the only architectural artifact that witnesses to that 11th commandment. I don't know of any manuscripts or any other stone tablets that would have that. Maybe they existed at some point, but we only know of this one particular witness. I would suspect if this were original, there would have been preserved in other various streams that reading in other witnesses. I would suspect. I can't say for sure because I don't have access to the original. So I can only speak, however, in probabilities. But most likely, if we're just going with probabilities, yeah, this ain't original. This was just added by the Samaritans as justification for their theological schism. So, so that's why I found it kind of funny, right? It would be like this. All right. Here, let me give you an example with the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox debate, right? Because a lot of the viewers were familiar with this debate, right? It would be awfully convenient if we found all of the sudden a manuscript dated to the 2nd century of, a 2nd century pope saying that I am not the supreme leader of the church, nor will any of my successors be. And those who recognize that I am first among equals, that's the true church. And the filioque is wrong. And purgatory and the Immaculate Conception are false, right? If we found a manuscript that said that, right, that's supposed to have been dated to the 2nd century. Okay. I think we can I don't know if this really is a 2nd century manuscript. This seems to really fit the narrative of the Eastern Orthodox, right? So it would seem like there's some motivation for somebody to falsify this document, forge something, and say that this was a 2nd century document when in fact it's not. Which, by the way, this stuff happens all the time. And conveniently, or interestingly, I should say, it actually happened with both sides, both Catholics and Orthodox. From the Catholic side, there were people creating forgeries. You probably know of some. But the Orthodox side also created some forgeries around the time of Photius and later. Both sides created forgeries to justify theological positions for either. So it wouldn't be unheard of. And there's even non-Catholic, non-Orthodox modern groups that create forgeries like this. Not saying that this tablet is an actual forgery. But we will see maybe a scholar has access to a papyrus manuscript that's blank, but it can be dated, carbon dated to, 2000 years ago. And they will take that. And since they know how scribes wrote at the time of 2000 years ago, they will write in the hand of a scribe from 2000 years ago on top of a 2000-year-old papyrus. And they'll write something that's theologically motivated for them. We actually saw this in one particular case where a scholar appears to have written something that effectively claimed that Jesus was in a homosexual relationship and wrote a whole story about it, a whole gospel about it. And a lot of people thought, this is awfully convenient for the modern time period that's trying to promote these things, right? This is awfully convenient that all of a sudden this is discovered today. And what this is likely a reflection of is a modern scholar knowing how to write in that hand and using a papyrus manuscript that really is about that old, but creating and forging their own gospel. So we've seen people forge things before. It's not unheard of. It happens all the time. I'm not saying this particular one is a forgery, but what I'm saying is that reading of an 11th commandment is clearly a later interpolation and not original. So those are my thoughts on the matter. I hope you found this to be interesting and informative. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. Greatly appreciate your support for the channel. All right, that's going to do it for now. We'll see you later. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe. And for a deeper dive, check out my courses at rtcourses.com and my Patreon channel at patreon.com/reason of theology.